art now? Can you think of things that do still succeed in, rising above this suffocation? Examples perhaps you can all draw from your own experiences of Sublime in stuff that's being made and generated and put out there, not necessarily in particle physics, but in the world day to day. I mean, is it invisible? Is it non-existent?
I thought it was interesting in the introduction you mentioned the WAP video and I don't know if, for people who are not familiar with it, it's Nicki Minaj and Megan Thee Stallion have a video which is incredibly raunchy. And, we see that, I guess, more as trashy than transcendent. And personally, I kind of agree, not that it's trashy, but I don't find it empowering from a feminist perspective. I think it's, it's catering very much to the male gaze, even though it's also subverting it somehow. But I do think that it's really important to say that, I guess for younger generations, my sense is that what older generations and like our ancestors thought of as the sublime, today for young people is maybe characterized more by things that are magical or epic or sensational. And there's something about that video, for instance, that gets people talking, and there's something to analyze in it. There's also this kind of resistance to the sublime, which has always been, very classed, as I said. It's very, the sublime is a space which has really constricted people's behavior and been very normative and said, this is how you're a lady or whatever. And there's something in this video that's saying that, no, we don't want to be socially acceptable. This is something different. And it's also kind of, it's blurring the lines between pornography, I guess, and art, which the kind of old-fashioned school would say, oh no, you can't do that. But I just think that people who are into that kind of art form, that art expression, are also seeking something sublime.
I can't help but see a similarity there to gospel music in the 18th and 19th century as a way of something very powerful and transcendent, tied to Christianity, and latterly after that, jazz. I mean, these things really, it seems to me, have broken these levels. But I just wonder if you can have some more examples of perhaps guide the way we can get back to it that are happening in our contemporary culture.
Oh, that's too
beyond the wet video.
I think it's hopeless. I'm afraid I think the Sublime is completely dead. There's a couple of amazing composers, Max Richter, if anyone's heard of him, wonderful composers that take you there. But I have to say, we were all asked actually to watch the WAP video, and we were asked also to look at this art by a Japanese artist by Murakami. And I don't know if any of you have seen this WAP video, but actually, I watched it. It was very interesting. I was thanking whoever decided we should watch it, because this was my first introduction to modern culture. And and actually, I found myself singing sort of along. There are whores in the house. There's whores in the house. It was a good song. And actually, I think if art is an expression of a culture, it absolutely, in fact, both of them absolutely express our own culture. I mean, what are our obsessions? Sex and shopping. Murakami looked like he'd designed a shower curtain for kids for Tesco. This is what we do. In fact, as for the sort of, Minna, the feminist angle, I thought that was astonishing. Though my mother used to say to me, women will always be more powerful than men, because we have what men want, our bodies. And I think that is the sort of message of this sort of reclaiming our sexuality video. But I have to say, the language was really shocking to me. I want to gag, I want to feel pain, do all these things to me, please. And it was like, what is that about? And the trouble is, it might be totally, totally clever, but the people who are watching it and getting aroused by it aren't. They might not be super clever. And, and women on the whole aren't super beautiful. I hope all of you are going to be watching it when you go home tonight. It's really sexy. It works. But as for Sublime, I fear it is really, really gone, dead and gone.
Well, well, I hear quite a lot of Sublime applause or laughter or whatever I hear people alive in this tent. And if the Sublime is part of being alive, how do you fit? Rupert, Minna, perhaps you could square the idea that it's dead. I mean, are we not going a bit too far if we say that the Sublime is dead in the modern world? Are we really that stuffed?
Well, I'm afraid I didn't do my homework. And,
You've got a different kind of pussy.
and yes, I'm afraid I haven't actually seen the WAP video yet. Obviously, I'll have to watch it when I get home. But so I don't have an opinion about it. But I would say that we live in a very secularized culture, and anything to do with God or religion is usually filtered out of public life. It's simply, you can't, no one ever goes to church or sings hymns or prays on television or anything. It's been privatized. Everything to do with religion's been privatized. And when they were doing the Downton Abbey series, somebody asked, why don't they ever show them saying grace before meals? Because at that time, they would have said grace before meals. The answer is because it might have offended atheists to have grace on television. So we live in a culture where secularism isn't just seen as a way of not favouring one religion over another, but the default position is non-religious or even anti-religious. So I think there's something about modern culture which is actually amputating the transcendent and the sublime, but it can't be amputated from human nature, which is why it keeps coming up again in all these different forms. And I think in the modern world, the main way in which people experience it, a lot of young people experience it, is through a kind of psychedelic rite of passage, which I think for many people is an opening to this realm that our education and our culture tends to suppress. So I think that's one way. I think there are also various arts. I mean, I know this is a terribly niche minority interest, choral evensong in cathedrals. But there are composers still writing exquisitely beautiful music. Sir John Tavener, for example, which is performed in choral. It's not just 16th century polyphonic music. There's modern composers writing music which is designed to be elevating and inspiring, and actually is in many cases. So it's not as if it's gone away, it's just that it's been marginalized and or sort of put beneath the radar. Even though cathedrals are pretty large, hard to miss, lots of people have never been into them because it's simply not part of secular culture or education to think about these things. So I think we have had a kind of general suppression of the sublime in the name of so-called science and reason.
Oh gosh, do you mind if I say something?
Please do.
No, but you remind me, that story of the cathedral, you remind me of that because about 15 years ago, I was on a train with a young lad of 20 and I saw he was reading a philosophy book, and anybody who reads a philosophy book, I love them, of course I do. And of course I had to talk to him, what was he reading, what was he doing, etc. This boy, this young man, was a decorator. He had left school at 16 because school was completely boring, and he was going to see Salisbury Cathedral because it was the most beautiful building in the world, the most sublime building in the world, and he was going to listen to evensong. So there he was going to look at this building, he was going to listen to this music, and he was reading a book on philosophy, but he left school at 16 because our education is so boring. What was he doing? He should have been at university. He should have been, thinking, being, but he was there on a train. What was he doing? And that, I think, it shows, the sublime is dead if he has to do that.
Can I just say that we're very quickly, we're at an ideas and arts festival, and obviously people here are interested in philosophy and these big ideas, but also I've been, catching lots of very young artists who are performing amazing music. Like there's lots of jazz, there's Bulgarian indigenous music. So I think we also need to just insert that the sublime is perhaps not entirely gone.
I mean, hasn't every culture has always sort of protested its own demise? It's almost, again, it's like, every culture announces its own senescence as well. So, like the sort of commode argument, sense of an ending. And I agree with Minna, there's fantastic work going on. There's, Arthur Jafer's exhibition was great, all the sort of found objects and creating kind of beautiful art from sort of the randomness of life. Or Dorothy Cross, she makes, bathtubs, she puts, instead of the scum line, she puts kind of, gold leaf into it, so you sort of transmute mortality into, I think there's great work going on. I could carry on. But Mark asked me to talk about civilizational damage and darkness too. So
what I'm saying
something about that.
I'll join. What I'm trying to nudge at you, Joanna, is what are the dark forces at work here that make such intelligent people seem so gloomy about this?
Well, I think there's one. Just to really, so the one thing that, because I think I was interested in Sublime as the unfathomable, the incomplete, and I think there is a sort of civilizational damage that is going on. So lots of the art I know about, I find out from the internet, so it's wonderful in many ways. But there's also this sort of binary culture that's going on, which is the culture of the sort of bit, this sort of basic, kind of binary digit, the most basic unit of computing. And bear with me, but this is either 0 or 1. Everything is one thing or the other. And it means that when you go in these kind of decision tree worlds, you have these formulated choices for you, this or that. And it completes everything for you. And I think this entire culture of friend, unfriend, like, dislike, everything is sort of decided for you. You can only have one or the other. And maybe if we're going to reclaim the Sublime, it's going to exist in the sort of, again, going beyond all of that, this sort of civilizational damage, I think, that's coming through as part of our own culture. And maybe your man on the train is absolutely right to kind of go off to Salisbury Cathedral instead and, switch off his phone or whatever it is.
But what I'd love to say to Minna is just about jazz, because I've been noticing this, that I listen to music with different parts of my body.
To continue watching this video, click the link in the top left or in the description below. Or visit iai.tv for more debates and talks from the world's leading thinkers on today's biggest ideas.